What's up, everyone? My name is Ethan. This is Courtside TV. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and let's get into it. So, today we're talking about one of the other big deals that was made at the trade deadline. This is Norman Powell to the Portland Trail Blazers for Gary Trent and Rodney Hood. So, we're going to talk about the specifics of this deal, what this means for both sides, and how I like it for each team. This was one that I was surprised by, not necessarily that Norman Powell ended up getting traded, because it was looking like that was the way it was trending, a week or so before the deadline. We got some reports that the Raptors have been shopping him, and it was probably going to happen, right? But really the destination was what surprised me, because we got reports that roughly half the league was interested in Norman Powell, which makes sense because he's a very good player. He's, he could pretty much fit anywhere. He's one of those guys who doesn't really, need a specific system or specific teammates to thrive. He can just go in and get you buckets. He's a very good closer. Is able to, shoot from anywhere on the floor, and he just finishes off plays. And so he's a guy who could really fit on any team, and it would make sense for any contender out there to try to trade for him. So makes sense that he was on the block for the Raptors. But for Portland to swoop in here, given, the rest of their roster, was a little bit surprising, considering that Powell is a guy who plays like the 2. He can maybe play the 3. He'll probably play a lot of small forward minutes with Portland, or just one of those wing spots. Really gets kind of positionless at this point. But given his size and some of his defensive limitations, it was like, is he going to be able to play next to CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard? Because as we know, that backcourt's been together for a long time, and Portland has long needed more help in their front court than they have in their backcourt, given that their guard rotation has been one of the most dominant in the league over the past 5-6 years. So bringing in Norman Powell, another guy who is kind of in a very similar mold as CJ and Dame, it makes sense. You're just adding more offensive firepower, but the Blazers weren't necessarily at the top of my list when it came to teams that could probably use Norman Powell. Now, I don't think this is a bad move, because I do think it makes them better, considering just how well he's been playing this year, and, the Portland trying to load up offensively, because that's really what they're doing here, is they're adding another guy. This team has pretty much decided that they're not going to try to guard anybody. They're just going to try to outscore you, which is fine, because they weren't, there wasn't really a move out there for them to bring in like huge defensive personnel at the trade deadline here for them. So they just kind of decided, hey, we're just going to go all in on this offense thing, just try to have as many scorers out there as possible, and we're going to try to just score more points than you, be more efficient than you, whatever. And to their credit, it's worked for them so far this year. They're not a great defensive team. They have some guys who can get stops out there, but really it's just Damian Lillard closing in crunch time, and even with CJ and Nurkic, who've been out for a while. CJ's back now, but and I think Nurkic is back soon as well. And so, they've been able to execute and win games, but they're able to, get these guys on the court together and just put up a ton of points, and just hope that, they can score more than the other team, and that's fine. So in that sense, I do respect the Blazers for, going the direction that they're going in, and I think this does make them a better team. Like I said, does it push them over the top of any of the other teams out west? Probably not. But honestly, given the way the injuries have gone, if the Lakers can't get healthy, and maybe the Clippers don't put it together, Denver doesn't put it together, the Jazz might, be pretenders or whatever, if you believe that, the Blazers could find themselves in the conference finals, or even potentially upsetting their way to a finals run. It's not out of the realm of possibility, right? Anything can happen in the NBA and in the Western Conference. And if I was Portland, I'd be encouraged by this move. I think this does, it doesn't really move them up a tier in my opinion, but it does, let them kind of crack open the door to potentially, upsetting their way into a nice little playoff run. And then as for Toronto's side of this, I really like this deal for them as well. I think they probably could have gotten picks for Norman Powell, or, maybe another player who could play in their rotation, more of a veteran type guy if they're still trying to be good this year. But they ended up going with Gary Trent, and there's no picks involved in this deal. Trent is the asset that they're getting back. And this is interesting because both Powell and Trent are going to be free agents at the end of the year. Trent is a guy who is going to be restricted. He was a second-round pick, so he only had 3 years on his rookie contract when the Blazers signed him to it. And so, Portland decided that they'd rather pay Norman Powell than they would Gary Trent. Who knows what either of them are going to get on the free agent market. It'll probably be about the same. Maybe Powell will be a little bit more expensive given how well he's played this season. But Trent is a young guy who is getting better, and in restricted free agency, some guys get really overpaid in that scenario. So the Raptors might have to pay him a lot of money to stick around, but he's a very, very good player, and he fits here. He's like in that same exact role as Norman Powell was, just a lot younger, and you might not have to pay him as much. So I think this is a big win for Toronto. They get a guy who, can play pretty much that same role, and can just fill in those Norman Powell minutes, and it's not that much of it's not that big of a deal. They also get Rodney Hood, who is mostly just here to make the money work, but he can play still. He can play minutes for them and help them down the stretch. And he's also a guy that they could potentially flip later, because he's a guy who contenders probably are going to want to get their hands on. Not necessarily going to be worth a ton on the open market, but he's proven, over the years that he can play in the rotation for good basketball teams. So I would expect him to get a couple of looks in the offseason, because he does have another season left on his deal for about $11 million. So maybe somebody trades for Rodney Hood a little bit later and they can get something else out of this deal. So I have come around on this deal for the Blazers more over, the past couple of days since it was made. When they did this trade, I didn't love it for Portland here, just because I thought, well, you're giving up on Gary Trent, and he's a young guy who I like a lot, and you're basically trading for the same player, just a couple years older, and it's probably going to be more expensive. But looking into it a little more, I think Powell's probably a little bit better fit with Portland, given his supreme ability to just jack up shots and finish plays, and he can hit from anywhere. Gary Trent can also do that, but I just think he's not quite as good at it as Norman Powell is. So, you're getting an upgrade, and also I didn't realize that Trent was headed into free agency this summer as well, so they were going to have to pay him money, and it sounded like they weren't comfortable with paying him the contract that he was going to want. So there's that, because I thought that he had a couple more years on his rookie contract, but it was only a 3-year rookie deal because he was a second-round pick. So it's not that bad, given the fact that both of these players are going to be entering free agency this summer. So Portland just decided that they were more comfortable with Norman Powell than they were with Gary Trent, and I don't really have a problem with that. It makes them better in the short term, and as for Toronto, I think this works with their long-term vision for the team, so I do like this trade for both sides. But yeah, I think that's about it for this Norman Powell to the Blazers trade. Like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to, leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about this deal and what you would like to hear me talk about. Are there any other deals from the trade deadline? Because I've pretty much gone through all the bigger ones. I might do a video on Aaron Gordon to Denver in the next couple of days. Haven't decided yet. But yeah, we're going to be talking about pretty much whatever trades are left, all the big ones, as well as any buyout moves that happen that are big enough to talk about. Probably LaMarcus Aldridge to Brooklyn, potentially Andre Drummond to the Lakers. We'll just have to see how things shake out over the couple of days. I'm also doing breakdowns of every single trade that happened at the deadline on my TikTok page, which you'll see linked in the description. Every trade, even the small ones, over the next week or so, we're going to be breaking down every single one of those over there. So if that's something you're interested in, go follow. But yeah, with all that said, I will see you guys in the next one.